Flying is safer than driving? Well, let's find out in this Taking Off podcast. Hello and welcome to this Taking Off podcast. I'm Dan Milliken.
And I'm Christy Schaefer.
All right, Christy, everybody says flying is safer than driving. You know, it's the safest form of transportation, blah, blah, blah.
It is.
But
statistically.
But I want to bring up a famous quote from Samuel Clemens, who said, there are three types of lies in the world. Have you heard this?
No, but now I'm intrigued.
Okay, there are three types of lies, he said. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics.
Okay.
So
that kind of goes along with my thinking too, because, a lot of people know that I have a science background. I have, degrees and experience working in that field. And I've seen statistics being manipulated. So
yeah, they're easy to manipulate, and you can make statistics. We're both having trouble with that word.
Stats.
You can make them back up whatever agenda you come to the table with.
Yeah.
That's what the problem is. So
stats can fit your narrative if you play with them long enough.
So we want to be careful, and because I really want to get to the truth of the matter and not just prove a position I've already taken. So is airplane travel safer than, car travel? Well, that's the question.
It's really interesting. So I found and read this article recently, and this is kind of how it came up, where it was like, hey, is flying really safer? And of course, my brain went, well, yeah, duh. I mean, look at airline travel. But then I actually went through the article, and they brought up some really good points. And I thought it would be very interesting to discuss it and solicit some input from our viewers as well.
Right. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments. For Spotify, iTunes, and all that, I'm not sure what you can do for comments, but we'd like to hear what you think. What's important here is to differentiate airplane travel, because airline travel undeniably is significantly safer than driving down the freeway.
Correct.
So when you say that airplane travel is safer than driving, really you're saying airline travel, commercial jets, Part 121 we call it. That travel is undeniably safer than driving.
It says, just to start us off, you're more likely to be struck by lightning to be in an airline accident.
Okay, so airlines incredibly, incredibly safe. So what are we talking here? We're talking general aviation, and that's for the small planes, the planes that are flown for hobby or for small business, like what I do. And, it's flying those Cessnas, those Pipers, those Cirruses. And that is a different story when you look at the numbers.
And for the record, it says you have a 1 in 186,978 odds of being struck by lightning.
Okay.
Just for baseline.
Just for baseline.
Just for baseline. So we'll go from there.
So, all right. Let's talk about then, you read this article and you found out that it is not safer to fly general aviation than it is to drive.
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to start separating out the types of aviation. So like you said, we have to take the airline travel out of it. There's a lot of safety in airline travel, so we're just going to remove that from the pile. Now you're left with GA, or general aviation. But here's the other nuance to that as well, is GA also encompasses the private jet category. So
and we call that 135. Oh, it can be 91 as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're just talking about like corporate, private owner, Part 91 flying. And between 2012 and 2021, there were 2.14 accidents, and 0.48 were fatal out of those accidents. So we're looking at stats here. Now, for GA, like personal flights, we're talking, the small piston aircraft that are not turbine powered.
Right.
And it even says here, it says that we're talking about your $100 hamburger runs and cross-country family trips. 108 accidents and 21.1 fatal. They're saying per million flight hours.
Okay,
So that's like 40 times more fatal
yeah.
than the corporate jets.
Right. And then when you look at cars, I've seen this article has one thing, and I've seen some other articles anywhere between 12 to 20x of driving is the GA fatality.
Now, this is the sample size is between 2012 and 2021. Okay. They're saying that 67% were GA accidents for personal flights, and then 72% were fatal, apparently. They said that it's over 27 times the driving fatality rate. Now, that's not, are you going to get in an accident when you're driving? That's, are you likely to have a fatality during a driving accident?
Right.
So that, I mean, they said that that's even more dangerous than riding a motorcycle.
Well, and they're not able to do a real good apples to apples comparison, and they're having to adjust it because they're doing in aviation, it's by the hours. So out of 1 million hours of general aviation, X number of fatalities, where it's out of miles for automobiles, X number of fatalities. So they're trying to bring that together, but they do a decent effort here trying to bring those apples and oranges closer.
Right. They're trying to bring the million flight hours. And I mean, they're just trying to, like you said, bring it together to a comparable level. But according to the statistics on this article, and we'll post a copy of this article, right, so that people could actually go see it.
Yeah, I can put a link to it.
Yeah, I'll put a link to it. They actually referenced the McSpadden report, and they said that the greatest cause of accidents is pilot related. Now, that is one thing that it really has in common with car accidents, because like the majority of car accidents, as we know, are driver caused. So we're talking about human factors here.
Yeah, human factors. And by the way, I'm glad you brought up the McSpadden report because I've got it right here. It used to be called the Null report, and I was so pleased that they renamed that to the Richard McSpadden report. You know, Richard was a friend of ours. We've had him on the show before he died about a year ago. And he had dedicated his life to increasing safety in general aviation, and I like that they renamed it the McSpadden Report. Looking at the McSpadden Report, so I will kind of go down a rabbit hole for a second. A lot of people on social media, you see these accidents every day, and posted another plane crash, these people died or whatever. And I see over and over again people going, wow, is there just a lot more crashes?
Right.
When you look at the McSpadden report and look at the actual numbers of GA, I'm talking general aviation only, it's been going down.
So is it GA including corporate?
No, I
planes
took
as
that
well?
out.
Okay.
I took it out.
Okay.
So I'm looking at just the general aviation accidents from the 2023 report. And when you go back 2014, there were 966 crashes. Out of that, 196 fatalities. It went up in 2016 through 2018, and then a downward trend since then. And in 2023, it's down 933. Not a huge drop, but a drop nonetheless. But here's what's significant. The number, that's just accidents. The number of fatalities has dropped. From 2014, it was 196 that year, to in 2023, 157. So a pretty significant drop in fatalities. So yes, we are seeing it more on social media.
Right.
And all the people that are reporting on it, us included, we report on news, and some of that news is crashes. But you see more people reporting on the crashes, so you think that there's a lot more crashes, but the truth is there's not.
Imagine a news network that only reported on like
Car crashes.
Everybody would be afraid to drive.
Yeah.
It would be insane. Imagine if we did that.
And everybody would think that car crashes are on the rise.
The thing is that when an airplane crashes, it's sensational.
Right.
Planes are falling out of the sky. It's easy fodder for that type of, narrative. But I do agree it is coming down. The question is, what's causing them to begin
Okay, so
with?
let's go back to the human factors.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing?
So I'm seeing they've broken down a lot of it's like mechanical. They're talking about engine failure, fuel management, defining events. Okay. So loss of control in flight, that's where the majority are fatal.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Loss of control. And what does that mean, Chrissy? Loss of control in flight?
So loss of control in flight is a stall or a spin typically.
Okay, so what we're seeing is, which is crazy because that's like lesson 2 and 3 of your private pilot training, is how to handle stalls. But I think that what's happening is people are having loss of thrust for whatever reason. The engine's partial, the engine goes out, whatever, especially at the critical times, critical phase of flight, takeoff, especially they lose some engine power, whether full or partial. And that natural inclination is to pull up away from the ground. They stall, they spin, and they fall 300 feet into the ground.
It says half of these accidents, are stalls and spins in the traffic pattern during maneuvering flight, and these are seldom recoverable.
Yeah, when it's that low. So what do we need to do?
We need better. The way I see it, obviously I fly for the airlines now. Most of the time, I still fly GA, just not as much as I did. But from my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, please, I want some comments below from people that are really well acquainted with this. I find a lot of it is a loss of proficiency.
Okay.
People need to go out and fly. And I say that as the president of a GA flying club, where I go back and we'll pull reports. We'll look at some of the statistics. And we have a lot of people that will only fly once a year or once every 6 months and, want to jump in. And, these are not people that have 20,000 flight hours, that really have that muscle memory baked in. I'm talking about your 300, 400 hour, private pilot.
Who's had that certificate for 20 years and they only have 300 hours.
And remember, what is like what do the regs say? We only need a flight review once every
2 years.
Exactly. So if you're really only going up once or twice every 2 years, your proficiency is probably lacking.
Right.
And so if you get into a situation like that, you may not have that skill set or the recency of being able to recover from that.
You're gonna go down to your lowest level of training.
Right. We made it a rule in our club that you have to fly GA at least once every 6 months, because we get it. Life gets in the way and everything else. But just for safety and proficiency, you have to fly GA aircraft once every 6 months in order to be able to check out the flying club airplanes.
Well, when we're flying Lola cross country, and I've got my crew with me, and they've been learning to fly, and really anytime I have a passenger, because I pretty much only do cross countries, there will be a time early on in the flight where we will go over emergencies. Okay, we just lost the engine. Here's what we're going to do, and we'll run through exactly. And the number one thing that we preach is pitch for glide, pitch for best glide. So what's that number in the Wong Warrior?
It's 72, 73.
Okay, and I'm 85 in Lola.
Yeah.
So that number has to be ingrained. You have to know 72. You have to know 85. You have to know that number so that when that emergency comes, you instinctively, muscle memory, you pitch for best glide.
Yeah. In the Embraer, in the 175, we have a green dot, and we literally fly green dot if we
Nice.
ever lose dual engine failure.
Dual engine failure.
Yeah,
right.
that would be very unlikely if that ever happened.
Bird
but
strike over the Hudson, right?
yeah, yeah, a silly situation.
Yeah, so I think that you're right, absolutely right. And Josh Flowers preaches this quite a bit, is that it's not enough to be legal, you need to be proficient. And proficiency is going to come through training, and we need to be training.
Yeah, it says that there's They break it down. This article is really great, you guys, and they've got a really good graphical depictions that makes it super easy for the viewer to read. They talk about landing accidents and stuff like that. Loss of control while landing is a big one, but they also have takeoff and climb accidents. And it says loss of control. There were 40 non-fatal, but 3 fatal. But get this, there were 30 stalled or settled on takeoff, but like half of those almost were fatal.
Right.
So you kind of look at these. There's another one here where there were 11 where they collided with an object, and 4 of those were fatal. So you kind of look through this and you're like, this is okay. It makes you think, what do I need to practice? What should I be working on? And you kind of go to these things that are really, really prevalent in these acts, like what causes the highest fatalities. And there you go. There's also CFIT, controlled flight in a terrain.
And that's going to be, for those who maybe not understand, CFIT means that there was nothing wrong with the plane. You flew it into the ground.
Yeah.
So like you got spatially disoriented at night, or you were in IMC, which means you're in the clouds. You couldn't see, and you end up flying into something.
Oh, here we go. So this is probably my favorite topic to discuss when I'm doing flight reviews and things like that. Unintended VFR flight into IMC. It has a 71% fatality rate, and they break it down. Why is that? Poor IFR technique. 7 out of 7 were fatal.
Wow. So they're not transitioning to instruments.
Yeah. So
and even in private, you have to do 3 hours of this training. So I don't understand why.
3 hours is nothing. And you know,
Yes,
but
that's
you know
true.
what it is too? Again, it goes down to that recency and proficiency. If you're not practicing, you're not going to be good at it. I mean, just point blank. It's 100%. It's not, you can have an instrument rating all you want, but if you don't ever go out and practice, you're not going to stay proficient. And when you get into a situation where you find yourself in the clouds, you're not going to be able to transition properly because all you've been doing is VFR flying, if flying at all, and it's going to be a lot harder for you. In fact, I would say that could potentially be even worse because you might be complacent thinking, I'm instrument rated. But again, if you're not proficient, that's not going to help you in this situation.
Yeah, you've got to be able to transition to your instruments. With my S Films business, we do a lot of training videos, marketing videos, things like that for companies. One of the companies that we have is a major helicopter manufacturer, and they were promoting a new program they had in their sims at the helicopter place for inadvertent IIMC. And they brought in 4 very experienced helicopter pilots. One was actually 2 of them were law enforcement. One was air medical, and I can't remember what the 4th was. And brought them into the simulator and put them into IIMC, and all 4 of them had crashed within 60 seconds.
Well, look at the Kobe Bryant,
Yeah.
situation. Like, it's very evident that pilot was not current. He wasn't proficient in.
He may have been current. He wasn't proficient.
Well, yeah,
clearly.
he wasn't proficient. I'm not sure if he was current or not, so I apologize if I misspoke, but it's very clear that he wasn't proficient.
Yeah. Joe Casey, we talked about this with an episode with Joe Casey about spatial disorientation. Joe's big thing is having a bigger attitude indicator.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I have, as a backup AHRS right now in Lola, I've got the level bomb.
Right.
And I've got on the iPad, when I'm in IMC, I can pull up a huge, attitude indicator on that. And having the bigger attitude indicator will just help you transition more to instruments when you're in IMC.
Right. I don't discount that. I mean, in the airlines, we have a huge attitude indicator. Like, we have a huge PFD. So, and it actually says here in this article, it says that airlines are structured and risk-adverse operations, which is what makes it so safe. So that's what we need to bring back down to the GA level. The problem is that, like I said, we're trying to allow that freedom of, okay, go fly, but get your flight review every 2 years and whatever. I mean, in the airlines, as a captain, I get a flight check every 6 months now. I either have a line check, like while actually flying, and then 6 months later, I go to recurrent, which is a flight check. And then 6 months later, I get a line check. And then 6 months, and so on and so forth. So every 6 months, I have to get checked out. And every, 90 days, I have to make sure that I'm getting at least 3 landings. And obviously, I get a lot more than that. But it's structured. There's a lot of checks and balances in place. And it's very risk adverse. We don't really take risks in the airlines.
Right.
And in GA flying, I don't know what to do other than to tell people to go fly. If you're going to fly, you need to fly often.
And you need to fly with proficiency in mind. You need to fly as if, training. You're training.
You know what? If you're flying by yourself or you're flying with, your spouse who's not a pilot or anything, go ahead and load that approach into your FMS and fly an approach. You don't have to be under the foggles to fly that approach.
Right.
You can't log it as an approach, but that's not going to harm your ability to get proficiency. Like, making sure that you're loading it, flying it, keeping stable on the approach, configuring on time, all of that contributes towards proficiency. So just like go do it.
Yeah, especially with approaches that you don't traditionally use a lot, like a VOR approach. If you're going into an airport that has one, load it in and fly it. Just, practice.
Just for practice. Sometimes it's really good practice to get that muscle memory in too when programming the box. So like I say the box, when programming your FMS, you could be flying along and before you know it, you are in IMC and you don't want to be fumbling around trying to remember, oh shoot, how do I do this? It's better to practice on a nice sunny VFR day than it is to be, droning around up there trying to figure out what to do.
The other thing that I've pulled away from these reports, is the fatalities on takeoff, right?
Right.
And so one thing that I have, and I've actually put it into my checklist now, is the pre-takeoff safety briefing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there's 3 elements to that I've decided I'm going to have in my pre-safety. And by the way, I do this out loud even when I'm alone.
Okay.
And so number 1 is what's going to happen if I have loss of thrust on the runway, and at what point is where I'll stop, I'll try to stop. So that's number 1, and I'll establish, and I'll say it out loud. Okay, just past the Hicks logo on the pavement at this taxiway, that's my last point where I will try to stop.
So that's your V1.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Number 2 is where I'm going to put down once I've taken off.
Okay.
So, like at Hicks, my home airport, I know that about 8 to 10 degrees to the left, there's going to be a tan water pump thing. I want to be just to the right of it, and then banana around to the left for my longest kind of out. Right. So that's my out for there. And at every airport, I'll look at that and go, where am I going to put down? And it may be just that, if you're super unfamiliar and there's nothing but trees, it's like, I'm going to land in the trees and here's what I'm going to do. Because if I don't do that, even if trees are not a great solution, but it's better than falling. Falling, you die.
Right.
Trees, you might actually survive.
Right.
So the third element of the pre-takeoff safety briefing is at what altitude, considering the current conditions and the current airport, I will turn back to the runway.
Okay.
And so I'll establish that, and I'll do it in MSL because that's what I'll decide, 800 feet AGL in these conditions, and I'll add that, okay, we're at 900 feet elevation, so it's 1,700 on my altimeter. Anything below that will be straight ahead or, within 15 degrees.
Right.
So I call that the red zone. Now, with my airplane, we get full power for 5 minutes with the TSIO 520 engine, so turbo. So for 5 minutes, I get 310 horsepower. I will run that full manifold pressure for through the red zone until
Okay.
I've reached that altitude. So anyway, those are the things I brief on takeoff.
And that's really, really good for you to do. I think everybody should do that. If you own your own private plane, definitely know it. If you're part of a flying club or you rent airplanes, get to know those airplanes. Get to know what they do. Go up with a flight instructor and just perform some maneuvers. Like I've gone up before in the Warrior and tried in different conditions what would be smart, what looks okay to try to do, that 180-degree turn back to the runway and stuff. And again, like you said, it's going to depend on the conditions. But if it's like a calm, warm day, I'm probably not going to try it unless I'm at least 1,000 feet AGL.
Right.
So, and that could be, out here, could it be anywhere between 1,600 and 1,800 feet?
Right.
So it just really depends. And how heavy is the airplane, et cetera.
Right.
So,
all the different factors.
yeah, but
which way the wind is. Also, which way I'll turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but either way, go sit down with a CFI, go up with a CFI, go practice some maneuvers, and just fly, honestly. Fly. I think that's the best number one piece of advice I could give to people is literally go fly. And I don't mean go up and turn the autopilot on. I mean go up and hand fly.
Right.
Really get to know and understand the feel for the airplane when you're doing different maneuvers.
And I would say run drills. Run loss of thrust drill.
Yeah,
What are you going to do?
I would say do that with the CFI.
Sure. But I think that like when I'm flying alone, I'll occasionally, I'm on a long cross country.
I see what you're saying. You're saying mentally just kind of go through like doing the
right.
ABC.
I'll look at it.
You're not saying pulling the power and actually doing
no,
it.
no.
Okay, see, do that with the CFI.
Right. No. I'm not saying pull the power.
Okay.
But like I've got I go on long cross countries all the time. I'll be up there and I'll look and I'll say, if I had a loss of thrust right now, I'm going to pitch for 85. And
you're saying chair fly emergencies.
Basically, I guess so.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Got it.
But I do that constantly when I'm flying.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So, run. So mentally run drills.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's what I was saying. I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to tell anybody to go pull the power and try to simulate landing in a field because they might not.
Well, and I can't do that on long. Well, not that I can't. It
would be impractical,
especially if I'm like on an instrument flight plan. I can't just suddenly, drop altitude and everything else.
Yeah.
But I constantly I'm looking at where I'm going to put down in the event of if the engine died right now.
Honestly, I do the same thing in the Warrior, 100%. And even flying the airlines, it's really good to have like mental. Not even if I have like an emergency, like a mechanical or anything like that. What if I have a medical emergency? What is going to be the nearest practical airport for me to land this airliner at?
Yeah, and I'm constantly looking at my flight as I'm going. I can make this airport. I'll be able this airport for the next 10 minutes.
Right. Some people will put the ring.
I have the ring.
Yeah, the ring up on
the glide ring.
Yeah, exactly. So, but either way, to me, that is the best advice I could give you is number one, just fly and fly as often as practical. 2, go up and actually, practice these emergencies with a CFI. And then 3, like Dan said, go and, chair fly emergencies, like think out ahead, like always be thinking, about what you're going to do if, what you're going to do in the event of an emergency.
So in conclusion, GA flying is not safer than driving.
According to this report.
And according to the numbers, I mean, it's not even close.
According to these stats, yeah.
It's not even close. So it is more dangerous to fly general aviation than it is to drive in the freeway. When you add airlines, then yes, it's safer to fly than it is to drive.
Yeah, it says, I just want to point this out too, just as a conclusion, the GA fatal accident rate is 14 times the driving rate. Like, I guess that's total GA. So,
and I don't know what they're comparing that to, hours versus miles.
Comparing distance and time as driving exposure measures to evaluate fatal crash risk ratios 2020.
All right, there you have it. Let's be safer, general aviation. So I want to thank our sponsors for making this possible, like Marshall Protective Services, MPSProtects.com, Colton Mortgage, ColtonTakingOff.com, 67 Designs, 67D.com, Z-Vision, XEVision.com, and Clemens Insurance, ClemensInsurance.net, and of course, Flying Eyes.
My favorite.
Use our discount code Taking Off, all caps, one word, at FlyingEyesOptics.com.
Flying Eyes makes me safer when I fly.
That's right. And we'll see you guys next time on the Taking Off podcast.